Good morning, Weekend Post viewers. My name is Pao Pakedi. We're here today regarding this year's June 16 theme, which reads, Eliminating Harmful Practices Affecting Children, Progress on Policy and Practice since 2013.
Good morning to you, Pearl, and good morning to your viewers. Thank you for having me. My name is Katla Hosechele, and I'm the Programs Coordinator at Bonella.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Pearl, and hello to your viewers as well. My name is Lesedi Ramika from Ramika Law Quarters. I'm here with Bonella today under our litigation wing, particularly under human rights and public interest litigation.
All right. Thank you for joining us today, guys. So, moving straight to business, what does Bonella really do and what services do you guys offer?
Okay, yeah, straight into business it is. Bonella, the Botswana Network on Ethics, Law and HIV and AIDS. It's a human rights NGO which essentially advocates for the rights of the marginalized in Botswana. And we also stand for the right to health to be upheld and protected and promoted in Botswana. Okay. So we do so by advocating for the marginalized, being the LGBTI community, people with disabilities, people living with HIV and AIDS, migrant workers, mine workers, and essentially children. So what we do is we assist with legal literacy. We also assist with litigation. I think Lesedi can further allude into that point.
Okay, please do.
Yes. We help Bonella in respect of any files referred to us. Okay. But the assistance is more in terms of just assessing the prospect of success in the file. Okay. And considering whether or not Bonella will likely succeed. That's basically it. We try and limit the cost implication that Bonella would face if they proceed with the case.
Right, amazing. So, Megatlaga, what kind of human rights violations do you document when it comes to children?
Okay, I'd like to first tell you about the process that we do in order to get to document human rights violations for children. So what happens is we have at the AGYW unit at our organization, which is the Adolescent Girls and Young Women unit, where we have young people who are specifically trained to deal with children's cases and children's issues. So what happens is that they go out into the community to reach out-of-school youth, and they also go into different schools to reach young people. So they do, when they get to these different schools, they do legal literacy sessions. They empower children on their rights, on how to speak for themselves, how to stand for themselves, and how to identify if they're being violated or they're being taken advantage of. And then when we do so, children are able to open up and tell us their issues. That is where we get to document them and also try to link them for redress or for psychosocial support, because you know that with young people these days, they're into social media and they encounter different mental health issues, or maybe because of the situations back at home, they encounter different mental health issues. So we get to link them for psychosocial support. We also have a very good relationship with our teachers and the Ministry of Education. So what happens at the schools is that when we get there, we also get to speak to the guidance and counseling teacher to get to know if children are indeed getting comprehensive sexual education, if children are having any problems, which problems are there, so that we can assist a conducive learning environment. So what happens is that after documenting these cases, we get to link them for redress, for legal redress. Okay. And then we also get to link them to different offices. The police, the social workers, the parents, to also the children, so that we can make sure that the referral system when it comes to children's cases is very active. We also resuscitate child protection committees. These are committees that deal with different human rights violations amongst children and make sure that they're adhered to or they're linked for the help that they needed. For example, let's say defilement. Without the social worker, the case cannot go on. So when we find that the case is not including the custodian of the child being the social worker, we get to link them so that the case can have adequate backup when it goes to court and so on and so forth.
That's a really great initiative.
Thank you so much.
So, Lesedi, can you describe the legal environment with regards to children, Mobuzan?
Our legal environment can be described in three levels.
Okay.
The first level would be the international sphere, okay. And then secondly the regional sphere, and then locally we also have to look at the legislation we have, which is not the local sphere. So in terms of the international sphere, we have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that was sometime in 1995. And then we also have ratified the African Union Charter on the rights of the child and the welfare of the child. And that was sometime in 2001. So that's the regional sphere. The African Union Charter, regional, and then the convention, yes, in terms of the international sphere would be the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And then locally, what we have is now legislation in terms of what the Parliament has issued. And the Children's Act of 2009 is principal, obviously, as the act to look to when you are dealing with the rights of the child. And what the Children's Act has effectively done is that it has incorporated, it's very ratified in the international sphere as well as the regional sphere. So they collectively come into one act, which is the Children's Act. But the Children's Act is not the only piece of legislation that you can utilize in the respect of protecting the rights of the child. There are many other pieces of legislation. There's the Penal Code, there's the Domestic Violence Act, there's the Affiliation Proceedings Act, and I think sometime in 2005 there was also a regulation issued in the Public Health Act, which made it illegal for mothers or parents just in general to refuse immunization of children. So we have a lot of acts that can be utilized depending on the circumstance.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Relisedi. Makatla, what does the theme for this year's June 60 mean to you as an organization?
Thank you so much for that question, Pearl. This theme dates back to 2013. The theme for 2013 was also eliminating harmful practices towards children. So now we're trying to look and gauge the legal and policy environment in Botswana. Is it conducive enough for children's rights? Is it protecting children? To what extent is it protecting children? In a classroom where I am blind, are there booklets with braille for me to read into? What policies are there to make sure that if I'm deaf and I'm schooling at a certain school, my teacher can be able to communicate with me in sign language? How far am I protected as a child who's LGBTI, living or going to school where I'm given comprehensive health education, but LGBT issues are not being put into this education system? So we're trying to look into the policies and the legal environment that are there. What are the gaps? How can we address these gaps? Are we implementing these beautiful policies and these beautiful legislations that Lesedi was saying? How far as a country do we have to go in order to put them into place and make sure that they work for our children and for the better good? Because I get the policies service provider not with attitude to say that, because we go to different schools to try to speak to children. You'll find or on a Wednesday, everybody's going to be putting on skirts. I don't want to be put on a skirt because I'm a tomboy. You know, maybe I don't want to do this because banaka bunzi go to golong go similar relationship they're engaging in different relationships. I'm attracted to girls, and then staff room because I'm dating girls. How far is this legislation and policy protecting me? And are people supposed to protect me? Are they protecting me enough? You know, so we look at the harmful practices that are there in regard to child marriages, in regard to female mutilation, female genital mutilation, in regard to circumcision, in regard to education and accessing services, health services and everything in that regard. So yeah, we should gauge the legal environment and see how far we've come as a country and see how far we can go as a country.
Amazing.
Amazing.
So are existing policies and laws in Botswana that are utilized, are they used to their best efficiency when it comes to children's issues?
I would answer that question in a more reserved state. Okay.
It's allowed.
Because you'd find that there's a saying that a tool is only as good as the wielder. And unfortunately, what we have is a good piece of legislation in the form of the Children's Act. But then the question is, what about the stakeholders that we are calling upon to act on the Act? Are they informed enough to know about the reliefs that are available in the Act? Have we done enough to spread out the knowledge that they are supposed to have coming in from the Children's Act? Yeah. So I would say we are slightly behind what would be ideal. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bonella, what is the role of culture and religion in perpetuating harmful practices that affects children, Mawutswana?
Like Lesedi is saying, it's a very objective question. It can have very different answers, but from an implementation view, we still find that culture perpetuates inequalities and violence towards children in some instances, because you go in places that are and you try to teach them about this beautiful piece of legislation called the Children's Act, to say that a child cannot be betrothed, a child cannot be married. It's our culture, it's our norm. We found it being done and we're still going to do it. And I always tell them in outreaches to say, because it speaks about all these harmful practices that he's been alluding to and how they're not supposed to be done. But in culture, we're still doing them in different circumstances. So we should look at our culture and assess, and also the legislation that has been there, which is in conflict. We should make sure that we know that when it comes in conflict, the Children's Act supersedes all other pieces of legislation, and then it always takes precedence. So it can always put you behind bars, or it can always take the necessary precautions when it comes to protecting our very beautiful and lovely children in Botswana.
Future leaders.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have adequate resources to facilitate implementation of laws and policies pertaining to children in Botswana?
I would say we do. I mean, we have institutions such as Bonella themselves, who are here to sort of be the ear on the ground and try and eradicate any injustices and anything that's happening to children. They're here as an independent body, helping out on the ground, as I said. But in terms of facilities, if you look at the court structures and whether or not we have a juvenile court, whether or not we have sound practices in the court of law, I would say it depends on the circumstances. Right. There are courts that will have the matter heard in chambers, or what we call in camera, that is in private. And there are situations where, unfortunately, you'd find a child's matter being handled in open court. But it's really more of like an adjustment more than anything. It's rare, but it does happen.
It does happen.
It does happen. And then I think definitely we do need to put more money in terms of facilities. But if we look at the whole structure, there are institutions trying their best to help out.
Might I also add that also with good implementation comes also putting in the resources, but also we need to put in teaching or sensitizing service providers about children's issues and about these beautiful legislations. You can find a service provider doesn't know the processes that are there in the Children's Act. At a child's court, the people are not supposed to be present when a child is being tried. A social worker is supposed to be there when a child is being tried. A social worker is supposed to be there in every matter of children. You'll find that there's no linkages between healthcare providers, social workers, and the police in a defilement case. And then you wonder how it's going to go in court if that process did not take. So I think we should also sensitize this stakeholders, service providers, and also the public in general, because the outreach, you'll find that people don't even know what the case. And that's a little bit case defilement. So now we need to have a link, because like I was saying that we do resuscitation of child protection committees. We're doing them because in this child protection committees you have individual people or parents to these children who can be able to make decisions legislations, we can be able to inform others about these legislations that are there and how we can better assist our children. So also education. A re baleng, a re ithuteng ka dikgang tsa bana, a re baleng Insurance Act. E ska re melao e ta kana dikgang tse di harologaneng di ta. E be re thela re le mo mathateng. Because the other thing that we also find when giving people information or legal literacy, they don't know that if you see something where a violation happening to a child and you do not report it, you are also liable of that crime. Yes. And you also go wa go tsala dikgato ke se ke se bua bana ba to ba renya na re bone hela re o ntsa tswa ka hela ntsa ira helana ka ngwana se itse gore wa ikgolega. As soon as you see a child being violated, it is upon you as a neighbor, as a relative, to report this case so that the law takes its course.
Gore motswanela go gae a ikgolaganye le lona itse gore o tshwanetse gore dikgato ka tsa di hele ha ise motho ha go ga bone kana jalo le ha le gore ngwana ha se wa gago hela, it takes a village to raise a child.
True.
Very true. So do you think the policies sufficiently protect children, especially those who are vulnerable and marginalized?
I would say yes. Okay. I mean, the Children's Act, as I said, is a piece of legislation that was incorporating what the international environment deems to be fine, what the regional environment deems to be fine. And what you have is a piece of legislation that's not choosing nationality, it's saying children entirely. Yeah. You have a piece of legislation that touches on our marginalized groups like the disabled and so on. So I mean, you can always say you could do more. For example, the same piece of legislation says corporal punishment is fine. So it's not a perfect piece of paper, but it's something that for now is good enough.
Okay, all right. So in closing, Bonela, do you have anything to share le Motswana ko gae?
What I can share le Motswana ko gae ke gore Batswana a re somareleng bana. A re ithuteng bana ba rona. Let's make sure that we protect these people because they are the future leaders. Bana ba gaetsho, they don't know yes or no. They can't consent to sexual intercourse, unprotected sex. They can't say yes to marriage as well. So aka kwa re dumalane. Not even cohabitation is allowed. There's the Children's Act in Section 62, if I'm not mistaken, which speaks about that. But it's not allowed. Please protect your children at all costs. Like I had said before, it takes a village to raise a child. So let's look out for our children and make sure that they're most protected because they're our future leaders. Thank you.
I think I'll be short. Let's engage our stakeholders. Let's try and educate as many people as we can, and let's implement the act.
All right. Katlego, can you please share your contact details?
Yes. If you want to get in touch with us, or go to Facebook and search Bonela, the acronym Bonela, and then like the page. You can inbox us if you have a case you want to speak about, human rights violation cases, or if you want to know more about how we can assist children. And then you can also follow us on Twitter at Bonela Ethics, and also you can call us on 393-2516.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. Motsana we se kgang ke yone hela yo gore a re babaleleng bana re thokomelaneng le ha ngwana se wa gago ntse kwa gago o mmabalela. Thank you so much for listening to our show today.